Hey, what's up? My name is Yardfish, and I just want to make a very quick video talking about this dude on the internet launching possums into the sky as a kind of ha ha hee hee prank thing. I know that's a lot less extreme in comparison to a lot of the other things that we typically look into. These aren't like crush or snuff videos or anything like that, but they are a part of social media animal cruelty, a problem that we are trying on a whole to also address. Things that may seem innocuous on the surface can have some seriously bleak implications, as I've learned over the last couple of years, and can lead to some very unpleasant places. But more about that later. As for the point itself, there is a YouTuber out there called Charles Ross. This guy is quite popular, has a huge sub count, and he prides himself on being an ethical prankster, I guess you could say. Seems to be very well liked, very well respected, even has a little disclaimer on his channel saying pranks, but not mean. So less of a whole setting your house on fire and then telling you it's just a prank, dog, why you so mad kind of guy. And more of a take somebody with no hands to a psychic to get a palm reading kind of guy, which is kind of funny, yeah. So despite this nice guy reputation though, early on in December, a couple days ago, this dude decided to upload a video to his Instagram Reels where he recorded himself observing a possum as it crawled into what appeared to be some kind of weird homemade trap contraption thing. He's looking at it on some kind of screen, right? And he tells the opossum, yo, you go into Mars, homie. And the device proceeds to launch the animal like 50 feet into the air. It's shown flying up at an alarming velocity and is then shown smashing into the ground with a very audible and painful sounding impact. The animal then just it does not die on impact and just kind of limps away in a daze. Since I've started doing this kind of stuff, I've seen multiple videos of people tossing animals into the air pretty high up in an attempt to injure and kill them, like with baby monkeys and stuff. And yeah, despite the fact that, like opossums, those are animals that are built for the trees, guess what? Gravity kinda still kills them. They usually don't die immediately though, they're often severely injured and it takes them a while to bleed out internally and then die. Because, you know, severe damage to your internal organs and having half of your bones broken usually is not going to end well for you. Can't say with 100% certainty that this opossum did die. Didn't exactly see that myself, but I'm relatively confident in saying that it probably did die or now suffers life-altering injuries. This clip was uploaded with the caption W, you know, for win, in case you're not up to date on these Zoomer terminologies or whatever. I am not sure. It is unclear what he thinks he won in this case, but it definitely was not a positive reception because he was kind of immediately admonished and condemned by his own audience, as well as by the greater internet as a whole. A lot of popular content creators very openly and explicitly called this guy out, and that was a very heartening thing to see. We're kind of used to this kind of stuff just sort of flying under the radar, people just not necessarily paying a whole lot of attention to it. So when some of these larger content creators out there do decide to shine a light on this kind of stuff, it is a blessing, it is a boon, it is something to absolutely be applauded and commended. So seeing this kind of backlash to this kind of stuff was a really nice change. But anyway, regarding what this guy actually did, was there anything in there in that video that was potentially illegal? And yeah, there are at least two things in there that could potentially get this guy into some legal issues. The first is regarding the trap or whatever the contraption is this animal wandered into that then launched it up into the sky. Now, this might surprise you a little bit, but when it comes to capturing wildlife, of which this opossum is classified as, you can't just do whatever you want when it comes to trapping them. So, in regulations set down by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, they're the ones who dictate what is and is not acceptable legally in the state of Florida, which this guy is from. Now, animals like the opossum, they're classified as a fur bearer, and you do need a license to trap and capture them. Again, in Florida. So this can constitute a violation of that on a technical level, but beyond that, there are relatively strict regulations regarding what kind of traps you can use. So you can't exactly just stick a spike trap or a flamethrower trap on your property in order to deter nature's wanderers or anything like that. Even things like bear traps and body gripping traps require special permission from the FWC if you do want to use them against something for some reason. For the purposes of fur bearers like these, there are certain kinds of live traps and snares that are considered acceptable. I will leave a link in the description where you can go check this kind of stuff out yourself. Take a look at the traps that are considered legal and notice that conspicuously, catapults that launch animals into the stratosphere are notably absent. So potential legal violation right there. And then, of course, there is the entire issue with propelling the animal through the air at a very, very disturbingly high velocity until it smacks into the ground. Is that legal, you might be wondering? Well, believe it or not, despite the fact that Florida might have this reputation as this legendary land of lunatics, it actually has some pretty decent animal protection laws. There were a number of monkey molesters, for example, from Florida, and they received some of the harshest sentences out of the entire batch. The acts depicted in this video would most likely fall under Statute 828.12, wherein a person inflicts unnecessary or unjustifiable pain and suffering onto an animal, unless legally sanctioned, is gonna be in violation of the law. If we're looking at a case where the cruelty is particularly overt, vicious, and sadistic, then it's more than likely gonna be counted as aggravated animal cruelty, which is a felony. But in this case, it doesn't really seem like it's going to meet that particular standard. Rather, he's more than likely going to get hit with a misdemeanor if legal charges are brought to him. But an important factor to note is that when it comes to legal proceedings, especially in a case like animal cruelty, for example, then the intention of the individual is very important in building a case against them. In this scenario, this guy created this contraption, this snare, trap, whatever, with the express intention of momentarily capturing an animal so he could launch it way up into the sky, have it plop down to the earth, and then upload it onto the internet for clicks, clout, and good boy points. That is something that can potentially say quite a lot, legally speaking. That is something that can be viewed as an act of premeditation. The contraption in question was constructed seemingly with the expressed and sole purpose of inflicting potentially significant injury onto an animal, an unsuspecting animal, for the sake of entertainment. Like, you can't be posting stuff like this with a big fat W as your caption and expect it to not be interpreted in that way. You recorded this video, you edited this video, you took a look at that edited video, and then you decided to post that online to potentially make the fans go tee hee hee, but well, it didn't work out that way, and instead I guess they started throwing rocks at him instead. Digital rocks of scorn and admonishment. So yeah, there is enough stuff here in this one video by itself to potentially get this guy into some decent legal trouble. Like, he's most likely going to get hit with misdemeanors, like I said before, if that comes to pass. But while looking into this case, we also decided to take a look into this guy himself, Charles Ross, and this is not even remotely close to the first time that he's found himself in potential legal trouble. This guy has been getting in trouble with the police since 2014, as far as we could tell. He's been arrested multiple times for a number of different causes, primarily related to his pranks, with some of them being kinda rough, like impersonating a police officer and harassing people, threatening them in some cases. One article even stated that he was evidently charged for a prank involving jumping onto a float or something like that, which injured a couple people. So he was potentially facing battery charges, but those were apparently dropped. But he does not appear to be quite the angel or saint a lot of people seemingly expected him to be. I haven't really seen anybody defending this guy for the most part, aside from like just a couple random comments here and there. But for the most part, it seems agreed on that his actions were reprehensible and completely uncalled for. You're a big creator, you don't need to whack animals for clips. People are gonna watch your stuff, dude. I think I did see it mentioned in one of the videos specifically talking about this kind of stuff, that maybe there were some people under the opinion that opossums are pest animals. So it wasn't necessarily all that bad, or it can be seen as a form of pest removal or something like that. Well, opossums are not classified as pests under the FWC regulations. You're not legally allowed to treat them as such, though that probably won't really change how some people see it. Legal definitions might not necessarily make a world of difference to somebody who is having their garden or whatever messed with. Whether it's an opossum or a rabbit or whatever, they're going to consider it a pest because it's messing with their stuff, right? Sure, fair enough, you can consider them as a pest or whatever, but even if they were considered as a pest, legally or otherwise, that doesn't simply allow you to do whatever you want with them. We have regulations and restrictions and purpose for a reason. The savageries that some people can be willing to inflict upon an animal for minor transgressions can often be an indicator to their character. This is something that we learned very well when it came to the monkey torture stuff. A lot of people there would frequently describe these animals as pests. They would frequently describe them as ruining the livelihoods of poor Indonesian and Cambodian farmers and whatever. These people didn't care in the slightest bit that these animals were potentially considered pests in those regions. They were American. They live in the suburbs. They don't care. It doesn't affect them in the slightest, and they certainly don't care about the Indonesian rice farmer getting wrecked. All of their hand-wringing about stuff like that was just a shield for their own degenerate behavior. Like way back in the early days, we would see people constantly talking about this stuff in the comments, being like, oh, it's just a joke, they're just pest animals, we're not really gonna do anything like this, like what we're talking about. Stop taking shit so seriously, stop being some kind of bleeding heart, whatever. Stop implying that we're gonna be serial killers or whatever. And you know, as time went on, a number of these very same people that we were seeing in these comment sections and whatever, we found them on Telegram engaging in some of the most deviant acts imaginable. Some of those very same people trying to excuse their amusement with animal torture and animal abuse as just memes and jokes and not something to be taken seriously are now in jail. Because they was paying dudes in Indonesia to dress these little baby monkeys up in diapers and then do strange and terrible things to them. So whenever I see people talking about an animal can be a pest or something and that excuses the things that they might want to do to it, I always get that vibe. And it doesn't just apply to, you know, animals that might technically be a pest, but animals that people also very, very typically overlook because they're seen as like low value or something, because monetarily speaking, they're not very expensive to get a hold of. You know, anything like a rat, a mouse, a guinea pig, a rabbit, small rodents in general. These animals are often seen as disposable by a lot of people. I've seen cases where people would be like, who gives a shit? It's just a rat. It's just a guinea pig. You could just get a new one for like $5 or $10 or something like that. Why do you care? Why does it matter? If somebody wanted to torture and drown it or something like that. But what people just seem to consistently overlook a lot of the times is that it's not just simply about the life of the animal here and whatever value you choose to place on it. It's about what the actions of the individuals in question indicate. In so many of the cases that we see, the people who find entertainment and joy in these kinds of things, yeah, they have a tendency to escalate. And with those small animals that I previously mentioned, they are finding themselves the victims of these kinds of crimes more and more often in the digital age, specifically because they are so monetarily cheap. They're very easy to acquire and they're very easy to dispose of, which can be particularly valuable, especially if the individual engaging in these acts might be a teenager or something, as they would most likely be living with parents, so they can very, very easily acquire a hamster or a rat or a guinea pig, torture and kill it in their room, dispose of it, and nobody would be the wiser. That kind of stuff pops up quite a bit on Discord groups and the like. Sometimes the perpetrators were found and arrested, sometimes not. I am getting a bit off track, but I really did want to mention that at the very least. And I'll probably keep mentioning it far into the future in a lot of my other videos because, like I said, animal cruelty really is something that does fly under the radar quite a bit. And in my opinion, we really should be paying much closer attention to that kind of stuff and the things that it can be an indicator of. In fact, in the video that I will be uploading next, the guy that we will look into, a guy running a zoophile network where he abused dogs, just straight up murdered somebody. So yeah, that's about as far as you could go, right? But anyway, back to this Ross guy. Is anything gonna happen to him legally? I can't really say. From our experience, it depends heavily on what agent this case lands in front of, because it varies heavily from person to person. There are some people who just wouldn't care, and there are others who will see this and it will aggravate them considerably, and they will do everything in their power to make sure this guy gets arrested or faces some kind of charges. Not exactly a perfect system, but like I mentioned before, Florida has been pretty good so far when it comes to prosecuting a bunch of the animal abuse stuff. Nicole Devilbliss, for example, she was a monkey molester who paid $23 to a guy called Michael McCartney as a donation for his contributions to the community with regards to his videos and stuff. That got her like 4 years in jail. So who knows, anything might be possible. This guy's history with his infractions to the law might be something that acts against him because he apparently got away with quite a bit of stuff before with just a slap on the wrist. Maybe this might be a straw that breaks the camel's back. As an interesting thing to note as well, Florida has very recently introduced an animal abuse registry. It's one of the first states to actually do so. If you commit a bad enough transgression against an animal, you end up on that registry, and nobody really wants to end up on a legal registry like that. That is something that is going to be seriously undermining your future prospects. And that is something that we would really like to see implemented pretty much everywhere. But, this is a start. As for this guy, he most likely will not end up on our registry even if he is charged. His crimes don't really seem to constitute aggravated animal cruelty, so he's probably not going to end up on our registry. But I thought it was worth pointing out nonetheless. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be leaving now.